Okay, everybody, welcome here. Just a quick little video to talk about measurements. Measurements. What do we need with measurements? Why do we need measurements? How to take a measurement really quickly. And that's what we're going to cover here in this very short, brief video. Hopefully it will help you out. So remember, when we take measurements, it's really important two parts of that, which is we need a number and we need a unit. And out of those two, I would say the unit is always left out a lot of times by people. And why is the unit important? Well, if I have 100 of something, I have absolutely, positively, guaranteed no idea what that means. I could have $100, which is awesome. I could have 100 apples, still good if you like apples. You know, I could have 100 pieces of paper in case you want to write a bunch of stuff, I suppose. So it doesn't really help you, the number, if you don't have the unit. So they always need to be together. So you should never ever have just a number hanging out there by itself. Always needs a unit. It tells people what is going on with that value and what you're actually referring to. So how do we take measurements? What's the deal with measurements? Well, as you may know, there's always some type of uncertainty in a measurement. So no matter when you take any type of measurement, you are going to have some uncertainty, some estimation, sometimes it's referred to. So if we just scribble here really quick, a little kind of ruler action going on. And we'll just kind of connect the dots there and make it like a ruler. If I could draw straight, it's straight. We'll say this is a ruler that measures in centimeters, for example. So when we take a measurement, say my wonderfully not straightly drawn arrow there, we'll go right about there, and we want to take this measurement correctly. There's always an important thing to look at whenever using any type of measuring equipment. Doesn't matter if it's a ruler, doesn't matter if it's a graduated cylinder, it's a burette, whatever it may be. You always want to look at the scale. And when you look at the scale that is printed on that piece of equipment, there should be two sort of markings that you will see. I sometimes refer to them as the large markings and the small markings. And the difference between the large markings and the small markings in most cases is the large markings will have numbers associated with it. So we can see here that the difference between the two large markings on my ruler there is 1 centimeter. Now, the second one thing that you want to look at is you want to see how many smaller markings there are between those large markings. Once again, the smaller markings are usually the ones that do not have numbers. They're just dashes a lot of times, and they're between two numbers. So when we start counting, also a really important thing that sometimes people miss out on is when you're counting the smallest markings between two larger markings, you always start with the smallest marking after the last big marking or large marking. So here, 1 is our last sort of marked large marking on our scale. So this is where we would start counting our smaller markings. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We stop at the next large marking. So we always start counting the smaller markings after the last large marking and stop at the next large marking. So we basically have 10 little markings between our large marking, which represents 1. So that means that each of the small markings in this case represents 0.1 centimeters. How did I get that? Well, I could take 1 divided by 10 will give me my 0.1 centimeters basically. So what does that mean when we look at our scale? That means this first small marking represents 1.1 centimeters, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, I squeeze it in there, 1.9, and then 2. So now that we have the scaling done, what we want to look at is where I'm going to be measuring in terms of my arrow in this particular case. Now, when you take a measurement, no matter what piece of equipment that you use, there should always be some numbers that everybody should agree upon that it is at least that amount. For example, no matter who looks at my ruler here, they're going to all agree that should be at least 1.3. And that numbers, or those numbers, we would record 1.3. Now, I could clearly see, you could clearly see, I imagine everybody here could clearly see that the arrow is not right on 1.3. So it's not exactly 1.3. It's not exactly, if we go this step further, it's not 1.4. It is somewhere between 1.3 and 1.4. That right there is our uncertainty. That is our estimation that has to be made here in this particular measurement. So how do we make that measurement? How do we make that estimation of where I think it is? Well, frankly, most of the time people will just look between the markings here and go, well, in this particular case, perhaps it looks exactly halfway between the two. So halfway between 1 is half there, which would be like 0.5 or 5 in this case. And we would record 5 here as our last digit. And again, our units of centimeters. Now, let's just say, for example, somebody else looked at it and said, I don't think it's exactly half. I think maybe it's a little shy of halfway there. Somebody else might record 1.34 centimeters. That's okay too. By the way, somebody might look at it and go, I think it's a little bit further than half. Maybe they record 1.36 centimeters in this particular case. And that's really where the estimation is, or the estimated digit is, or the uncertainty really in this measurement. So, for example, when we record a measurement like this properly, like we just did here, we always record all the certain numbers. And we always record that first uncertain number. And that first uncertain number is where the uncertainty or estimation is coming into play. And by the way, when we do that, in perhaps a future video, those guys all together are what are referred to as significant figures, which, by the way, in this case, you could clearly figure out that this number here has 1, 2, 3 significant figures in this case. So when we take a measurement, the goal here is to always record all the certain numbers that no matter who takes a look at it are going to agree, and that first uncertain number, which is our estimated digit. And usually what we're saying is it's plus or minus 1 of that uncertain number. You know, it could be maybe 134, maybe it's like 1.36 there, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. How can we figure out really how far to take a reading? Well, you could actually take your smallest markings and divide it by 2, and that will get you 0.05 centimeters. And basically what that will tell you is you could take the reading to 2 decimal places, which is exactly what we did here. Now, for example, let's say we had a graduated cylinder where we have some type of volume that we want to measure. And in this case, we got and cheat a little bit here as I ran out of room there. So let me just drop that 10 down here, I think. We'll go milliliters as the units here. And we want to record a volume here. And let's just say our liquid kind of volumed out right around here. And when we take a reading of a liquid in a glass container, you usually will make a meniscus. Remember that a meniscus, we always read from the bottom of the meniscus because that is truly where the volume is. The rising on the sides is for some other reasons that occur, why it actually comes up on the sides against the glass container. But when we have a meniscus, it looks in this U shape. Always the bottom, we want to read it. So what we want to do is the same thing. We want to take our large markings, and I'll put a large marking up here at the very top. And between 10 and 20, that is 10 milliliters as our large markings. Our small markings here, again, we're going to start counting like we did on the previous one. We're going to start counting after that last large marking. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, stopping at the next large marking. So once again, 10 divided by 10 gives us that each small marking represents 1 milliliter. So this would be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 if I squeeze it in there. So once again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go here, draw a little line at the bottom of our meniscus, straightish as we can, and we could clearly see it is at least 14. That would be our certain numbers here. Again, not exactly 14, not exactly 15, which is above it. Again, we find ourselves somewhere in the middle. And let's just say, for argument's sake here, we feel it's a little bit more than half. So we would maybe something like 14.6, and the units milliliters. This would be our first uncertain number. And once again, this would be the proper measurement here. And that is all of our certain numbers. Our first uncertain number, this number also would have 3 significant figures because of it, with the uncertainty lying right here. So once again, if we wasn't sure at the beginning how far I should take the reading, you usually could go one more place to the right of the smallest marking, and you could verify how far you should take the reading by, again, just taking the smallest marking, dividing it by 2, in this case, plus or minus 0.5 milliliters. More importantly, it is 1 decimal place, and that is exactly where we took our reading. So this quick lesson here about taking measurements with a couple of things, a ruler or a graduated cylinder, doesn't really matter. What matters is you figure out the large markings, you figure out the small markings, and again, you figure out how far you can take that reading to. Once again, not in all cases, but in most cases, you could go one more place to the right of the smallest marking. If you're not sure, but you are sure about the smallest markings, just divide that guy by 2, and that'll tell you how far you should take your reading. Well, that's it for this really quick, short lesson on measurements the quick way. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped. If so, let me know. Leave a comment down below. If you want some shorter videos on some other topics in chemistry, let me know and I'll help you out there. Other than that, have a good day, night, or whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.